My dad gave my college fund to my sister's wedding, told me to figure it out, and then lost everything when I did. That sentence is going to take some explaining, so let me give you the full picture. Here's what I want you to understand about the family I grew up in. My name is Nathan. I have one sibling, a sister named Brooke, who is 4 years older than me. And if you have grown up in a family with a golden child, you already know everything important about the dynamic before I say another word. I'm not here to trash Brooke. I want to be clear about that. She's not a villain in the cartoon sense. She's a person who grew up being told she was exceptional and never had any particular reason to question it because the people responsible for questioning it never did. That's not entirely her fault. It is, to a significant degree, my parents' fault. My father Richard's fault especially. Here's what the family scoreboard looked like growing up, for context. Brooke was the one whose art projects went on the fridge. Mine went in the recycling. Brooke was the one who got a car for her 16th birthday. I got a card. Brooke's college applications were reviewed by my father line by line, revised, submitted to a family friend for additional review. My applications I did alone, in my room, at night, with a library book about college essays. Brooke got a graduation party with 40 people and a photo booth. I got taken to dinner by my parents, the three of us, at a place they chose. I'm not saying all of this to make you feel sorry for me. I processed most of it a long time ago. I'm saying it so you understand the context in which a man would look at his son and say, "You'll figure it out," because that sentence only makes sense inside a specific kind of family architecture. The college fund. Okay, let me tell you about the college fund. My father had told me about it since I was 7 years old. He said specifically, I remember this conversation because I've replayed it. He said, "I'm putting money aside for your education every year. By the time you're ready for college, it'll be there." He said this the way fathers say things they intend to become true. Seriously, like a promise. For 11 years, I believed him. I made decisions based on believing him. I worked part-time through high school not because I needed to. I thought we had the fund, but because I wanted to contribute. I chose my schools based on what the fund could cover plus what I could add. I had a plan, a real one, that I built on the foundation of something my father had told me was there. 2 weeks before my freshman year was supposed to start, my father sat me down at the kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon and told me the fund had been used to pay for Brooke's wedding. $41,000. Gone. He said, "Family needed this more right now. Brooke only gets one wedding. You're young. You'll figure it out." I looked at him for a long time. I did not yell. I did not cry. Something inside me moved that I don't have a clean word for it, was the specific feeling of a floor being removed from a room you had been standing in for 11 years. Quiet. Definitive. Gone. I said, "When did you decide this?" He said, "A few months ago. The deposits were due." I said, "Did you tell me?" He looked at me. He said, "I'm telling you now." I said, "Okay." I stood up. I went to my room. I closed the door. That was the end of the conversation. That was the end of a lot of things, though I didn't know the full scope of it yet. I found out later from my aunt, who thought I already knew that Brooke had been aware the fund was being redirected for at least 6 months before my father told me. 6 months. She knew for 6 months and said nothing. When I confronted Brooke about it, the one conversation we had that was direct and honest, she said, "I didn't ask him to do that. But the wedding is already paid for, so, as if it's already spent," was a complete moral argument. I went to my mother next. I want to tell you about what my mother said, because it is the single most clarifying sentence I received in this entire situation. I sat across from her at the kitchen table, same table where my father had told me 2 weeks earlier, and I said, "Did you know?" She said, "Your father worked very hard to build that fund, and he has the right to use it how he thinks is best for the family." That was her answer. I want you to sit with that sentence, not what it means, just how it sounds. Your father has the right to use it how he thinks is best. The fund he built for my education, for me, that he had described to me as mine, since I was 7. He has the right to use it how he thinks is best. For Brooke's wedding, I sat at that table and I understood 3 things simultaneously. 1, no one in this house was going to acknowledge that what had happened was wrong. 2, I was completely alone in this. 3, that was the last time I was going to try to have this conversation. I went back to school 2 weeks later. I applied for every student loan I qualified for. I applied for 3 part-time jobs and got 2 of them. I rebuilt my budget from scratch around a reality that was $41,000 smaller than I had planned for. And I did not go home for Thanksgiving. I want to tell you about that first week of freshman year because I think it matters to understand what figuring it out actually looks like from the inside. My dorm room was small, most of them are. 2 beds, 2 desks, a window that faced a parking garage. My roommate was a good guy. We got along fine, but he had parents who called every other day and a credit card for emergencies and the specific ease of someone who has never had to run the numbers on whether food is in the budget this week. I sat on my cot the first night Sunday, the week before classes, and I looked at my laptop screen, which had 3 browser tabs open: the student loan, confirmation page, the campus employment portal, and my student account showing a balance I needed to cover. The room was quiet. My roommate had gone to dinner with his family. I could hear people in the hallway, introductions, laughter, the particular high energy noise of people beginning something together. I closed the laptop. I lay back on the cot. The ceiling was that specific institutional white that doesn't quite reflect light, just absorbs it. I stared at it for a long time. I was not drowning in self-pity. I want to be honest about that. I was doing the specific arithmetic of someone who has just had the ground reorganized under them and is working out, methodically, how to stand on the new configuration. But I was 18 years old, and I was alone in a small room, and the thing I had been told was there for me had been given to someone else's wedding without anyone asking me. That is true. And I don't need to make it dramatic to honor how true it is. I didn't go home for Thanksgiving. I told my mother I had work commitments. One of the part-time jobs gave holiday hours with premium pay, which was true and also convenient. She said, "We'll miss you." She did not say anything else. I didn't go home for Christmas either. That one caused more noise. My father called twice. My mother called 4 times. Brooke texted, "Everyone's upset. Can you just come?" I did not respond to any of them. Not of a performance, not because I was making a point. Because I genuinely did not know what I would say if I walked into that house and sat at that table. I didn't have a script for it. And I've learned that when I don't have a script for something, silence is better than improvised damage. The second semester, I added a third job. The summer internship came through in accounting, not glamorous, but the firm had a good reputation, and they liked my work. They offered me a return offer for the following summer. I took it. By my junior year, I had a scholarship I'd applied for twice before finally getting it, the internship returning for a third time, and a GPA that had earned me a recommendation letter from a professor who thought I might be a good fit for one of the firm's competitive graduate hiring tracks. I had built all of it, with no fund, with no Thanksgiving dinners, with a parking garage view and a cot and 3 browser tabs. I thought about my father's sentence sometimes when I was building it. You'll figure it out. I was. There was a specific moment when I decided, not emotionally, but actually decided that I was not going to go back. It was a Thursday evening, spring of my sophomore year. I was at my desk in the student apartment I'd moved into with 2 roommates. It was probably 8:30, 9 o'clock. I had just gotten off a shift at the campus job, and I was eating leftover rice I'd made 2 days before because groceries were tight that week. My phone was on the desk next to the laptop. My mother had called that afternoon, the 3rd call in a week. The voicemail said, "We want you to come home for Easter. Your father wants to say some things. Please call back." I sat with that voicemail for a while. I thought about Easter at home, the table, the specific weight of sitting across from my father in a room where nobody was going to say what had actually happened. The way Brooke would make the conversation light and manageable because she's good at that. The way my mother would hover around the conflict without ever landing in it. The way my father would say something that wasn't quite an apology and wasn't quite not one and leave it for me to interpret generously. I picked up the phone. I did not call my mother back. I called my friend Joel, someone I had met freshman year who had become the kind of friend you build a life around. I told him I wasn't going home for Easter. He said, "You good?" I said, "Yeah, I just needed to say it out loud." He said, "Okay, we're doing Easter here then." That was the decision. Not dramatic, just final. By the time I graduated, I had been to the house in Columbus twice in 4 years. Once, briefly, for a family obligation involving a relative I actually liked. Once to pick up some things I had left behind. The visit involved a real conversation about what had happened. I took the job with the accounting firm. I moved to Chicago. I built a life with the specific quiet efficiency of someone who has learned not to wait for other people's timing. Joel helped me move. We drove a rented truck from Columbus to Chicago on a Saturday in June. We ate bad fast food. We argued about the radio. We carried furniture up 3 flights of stairs and assembled it wrong and had to redo it. It was the best day I'd had in a while. My first apartment had a kitchen window that faced east, and in the mornings when I made coffee, the light came through it at an angle that made the whole room warm. I stood at that window a lot in the first few weeks. Not thinking about anything in particular. Just standing there in my own space, which I had paid for with my own money, which I had earned with my own work. No fund. No fund. No. Family table? Just me and a kitchen window and coffee. I'd ground myself. I thought about my father's sentence sometimes. Not bitterly, just observationally. You'll figure it out. I had figured it out. It turned out I was actually very good at figuring things out, possibly because I had been given so many opportunities to practice. Brooke called me on a Wednesday evening 3 years after her wedding. She and her husband were separating. She was devastated. She needed to talk. I looked at the phone for a long time when I saw her name. Here's what I want to tell you about that moment. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel vindicated. What I felt was something more like a very clear, very quiet understanding of what was being asked of me and whether I was able to give. She was calling because she needed support. Because I had always been the quiet, reliable one. Because she had assumed, the way people assume things that had never been tested, that I would be there. She did not think of me as someone she had wronged. She thought of me as her brother. I let the call go to voicemail. She called again the next day. I let it go again. She texted, "Nathan, I really need to talk. Please." I wrote back one sentence. "I hope you find the support you need." And that was it. She didn't call again for 3 weeks. When she did, I didn't answer. My mother called the following day. Her voicemail said, "Brooke is really struggling and she needs her family right now. Please consider calling her." I want to be precise about my response to that voicemail. My mother had said 4 years earlier that my father had the right to use my college fund how he thought was best for the family. She was now asking me to be part of the family, for Brooke's benefit. I did not call back. I'm not going to tell you I felt nothing about this. I'm not made of stone. There was something sad in it, the specific sadness of watching a pattern complete itself. Brooke needed the family to rally around her. The family tried to activate me as a resource. The same dynamic that had operated my entire childhood, running in the same direction, toward the same destination. I was just not there anymore. My father had health issues in the year that followed, nothing life-threatening, but serious enough that my mother called several times in a way that implied she expected me to respond differently than I had been responding. I called once. I spoke to him for 11 minutes. I asked how he was feeling. He gave me medical details. He said, "It would mean a lot to have you around." I said, "I understand." We talked about his medication briefly. I said I was glad he had support from mom and his doctor. I said, "Take care of yourself." I hung up. My mother called the next day. She said I was being cruel. I thought about that word. Cruel. I sat with it. I am not cruel. What I am is someone who was told at 18 years old to figure it out. And who did? And who has been figuring it out alone since then? Who built a life that has no empty spaces where they were supposed to be? Because I filled those spaces long ago with work and friends and a kitchen window that faces east. If Richard had expected to remain in that life as a father, as a grandfather eventually, as a presence that would have required him to be a different kind of father at a different kitchen table in Columbus 16 years ago, he wasn't. What he got instead is a son who was fine. Genuinely, specifically, measurably fine. Which is what he said I would be. He wasn't wrong about that part. I want to tell you about Thanksgiving. I stopped going home for it when I was 18. For a long time, Thanksgiving was just a Thursday in November where I worked or studied or spent time with people who also weren't going home. 4 years ago, Joel and his girlfriend started hosting. It's a real thing now, 12 people, rotating who brings what, a table that barely fits everyone, someone always burning something, and it becoming the funniest part of the evening. This past year, I brought a pie, sweet potato, from a recipe I'd gotten wrong the first 2 times and right the third. I sat at a table with people who had chosen to be there, who were not performing a family because obligation said they should, who just liked each other and wanted to have dinner. The room was loud in the good way. Joel's girlfriend was laughing at something. Someone's kid was running between chairs. The pie was good. I was proud of it. I thought about my father's sentence once, briefly, and then I didn't think about it again. You'll figure it out. I had. I looked around that table and I thought, this is the family I made. Nobody gave it to me. Nobody sacrificed anything for it. I just showed up one Thanksgiving at a time, and eventually it was real. I'm grateful for that. And this took me a long time to get to almost grateful for the kitchen table in Columbus. Because without it, I wouldn't have learned what I learned, and I wouldn't have built what I built, and I wouldn't be sitting at this table with a pie I made myself and people who actually wanted me there. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. These are the stories nobody planned to tell. That's why they feel the way they do.